Hey everyone, you're watching We Had That, and today I'm going to talk about the 1986 Wave 1 Steel Monsters Metal Face action figure. With the release of Kenner's Star Wars figures in the late 1970s, the 3 3/4 inch format became the industry standard for action figures for the next several years. By 1986, it seemed like that was changing more and more. Masters of the Universe was nearing the end of their hugely successful run with their larger scale figures, and Kenner was wrapping up their awesome Superpowers line of figures of our favorite DC characters that varied in height but averaged about 4.5 inches. Kenner was also on their second wave of the Mask line of 2-inch figures. Even though G.I. Joe was still one of the top toy lines in 1986, with their highly articulated 3 3/4 inch line of real American heroes, we were seeing a lot of other lines that featured taller figures closer in size to Sektar's warriors. So it seemed a little behind the times when Tonka released their 3 3/4 inch Steel Monsters figures with 5 points of articulation similar to Star Wars figures, which, by the way, had just ended their run in 1985. It felt like toy companies were just trying any idea they could think of in the mid-1980s looking for the next big thing. I suspect that the Mad Max film franchise was the main motivation for the Steel Monsters toy line. The third Mad Max movie, Beyond Thunderdome, came out the summer of 1985, and even though it may not have been the biggest movie ever, it was certainly popular with kids my age at the time. If Beyond Thunderdome was the movie that allowed for funding of the Steel Monsters, the influence for the designs was actually the second movie, The Road Warrior. The Road Warrior movie was centered around a group of post-apocalyptic survivors planning a trip for survival across the wasteland and fighting a group of crazy bad guys in their own ominous post-apocalyptic vehicles. Since Tonka was famous for making sturdy truck toys, the focus of the Steel Monsters line was really the post-apocalyptic trucks. The figures themselves seemed to be almost a bonus, but Tonka did put a good bit of effort into the story behind the line. In the Steel Monsters world, there had been a disastrous explosion in an experimental lab which turned the world into a desert wasteland. The few survivors roamed the world in search of what little food and water was left. Each of the toy vehicles came with a little mini-comic similar to the ones that came with Masters of the Universe and Superpowers action figures. I believe each vehicle came with the same comic book, and a second, different comic book came with each of the single carded figures. These mini-comics gave kids a little bit of an idea of the personalities of each character. The vehicles and action figures were broken up into the good guys called Survivors and the bad guys called Marauders. The first wave included 5 vehicles but only 4 figures. 2 of the trucks both came with the same Metal Face figure. The bad guys were Talon and Metal Face, and the good guys were Half Track and Wheel Boss. In order to save money, Tonka used the same arms for all of the figures in Wave 1. Also, the 2 bad guys had the same legs, and the 2 good guys had the same legs, so only the torsos and heads were unique for each figure. Each vehicle came with a figure, and there was additional information about that figure on the side of the box. Strangely, there wasn't any information about each figure on the card backs, which were all the same, for the individual carded figures they came with. All of the card backs just promoted the first wave vehicles and their corresponding figure. However, they got the names of Punk and Metal Face backwards, and they also promoted the Masher as coming with the figure Punk, who is called Metal Face here on the card back, even though the actual Metal Face figure came with both the Masher vehicle and the battery-powered bomber. Punk wasn't released with a vehicle at all in the first wave. I mentioned before that it seems that this line was influenced by the movie The Road Warrior. The Metal Face figure in particular looks quite a bit like the character Lord Humongous from the movie. Although different enough to avoid any potential lawsuits, Metal Face and Lord Humongous wore very similar masks. Both had an almost bare chest, with Metal Face wearing a single diagonal strap and Lord Humongous having a black leather harness, but still, they had a very similar look. They both also had what appeared to be leather bracelets. Both Lord Humongous and Metal Face Both seemed to have only a small amount of hair on the back of their heads, as though they had been affected by radiation. The biggest difference in the two is that Metalface wore black pants while Lord Humongous wore black shorts. There's still so many similarities that I find it hard to believe that it's a coincidence that the two look so similar. The Steel Monsters concept seemed to be a good one, and Tonka claimed it was going to spend $4 million on advertising for the toys. They'd even planned at one point to make a 13-part animated cartoon series. I don't remember seeing any advertising for the Steel Monsters line as a kid, and I certainly never saw a cartoon. I don't know if it was a lack of awareness of the line or if the concept just didn't strike a chord with kids at the time, but Steel Monsters didn't seem to find the success that Tonka had hoped it would. A second wave of carded figures was released, and I've read that a second wave of vehicles was also released. However, I've never seen any of the vehicles from the second wave except in catalog photos. I believe that the second wave figures had already been manufactured when Tonka decided not to move forward with the line, so they decided to package the figures on cards and sell them just to get rid of the surplus stock. I don't know for certain that this is a fact, but based on my research, it seems logical. Anyway, as a result, the second wave of figures are much more difficult to find than the first wave of figures, and they also tend to cost a lot more. I only have one of the figures from the second wave, but I would love to pick up more of the figures if I can find them at a decent price. I never had any of these toys as a kid, but I'm sure that if I'd had them in the late 70s or early 80s, they would have joined in with my Star Wars figures in their adventures. They really would have worked well with any of my figures with 5 points of articulation. Did you have any of the Steel Monsters action figures as a kid? Did you even know they existed? Do you collect them now? Tell me in the comments below. Also, please give this video a like and share it on social media. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so you'll be notified when I post new videos. And one last thing, if you're a fan of toys, you should know about Toylanta, the biggest toy show in the southeastern United States held annually just north of Atlanta, Georgia. Visit Toylanta.com for more information. As always, thanks for watching.